Live, this is 24-Hour News 8.
First tonight at 6, a push for change in the way Michigan seats juries for criminal trials.
You might be guaranteed a jury of your peers in this country, but critics say that's not happening here. And they turn to Target 8 to make their voices heard.
Target 8's Coco McAvoy examined the racial makeup of juries in West Michigan and took her findings to Kent County's chief judge.
Good evening to the both of you. Courts in Michigan are not required to track the racial makeup of juries, but we found that 2 West Michigan counties do it anyway by asking jurors to fill out this voluntary survey. We used the resulting data from Kent and Kalamazoo counties to see if our juries are as diverse as our communities. In the heart of downtown Grand Rapids stands the Kent County Courthouse. On a Monday morning, criminal cases are scheduled for trial, and each floor of the courthouse fills with prospective jurors.
Will all the potential jurors please stand?
But this Monday morning was different. After the jury was seated, the defense objected that 2 people of color were kicked out of the pool by the prosecution.
I'll hear from Mr. Greene first.
The only thing that was obvious is that she deliberately removed the minorities from the jury.
Ultimately, the jury remained the same.
I can't say that race alone was the basis here.
But the courtroom showdown gave us a glimpse into a deeper problem. And do you think minority representation is an issue in Michigan?
Well, I think it is because traditionally it seems minorities have been underrepresented on juries.
And by how much? Target 8 analyzed last year's court data from Kent and Kalamazoo counties and compared it to the most recent census.
It's somewhat disappointing.
That's because in Kent County, the African American and Latino populations each make up about 10% of the community. But court data shows only 6% of jurors were African American and 3.9% were Latino.
You'd like to be as broadly represented as possible, and while I'm not looking for the precise statistical equivalence on juries as we have in the community, I'd sure like to be somewhere in that neighborhood.
Target 8 found the same problem in Kalamazoo County. Census data shows the African American population at around 11% and Latinos at 4.5%, while last year's data shows just 6% of jurors were African American and just 1.6% of Latinos were represented. Critics blame the system Michigan uses to select potential jurors. Our state is one of only 7 that still pull jurors from a single source, relying solely on driver's licenses or state ID cards from the Secretary of State. The 43 other states can select jurors from multiple lists like unemployment or welfare rolls to cast a wider net.
Currently, we have issues in several counties where there are not enough jurors on the pool to serve, as well as, our Constitution affords us an opportunity to have a jury of our peers.
Representative Brian Banks is pushing legislation to change the way jurors are selected in Michigan. His 2 bills would add the names of people who file for income tax and people who are registered to vote.
I certainly would be supportive of exploring alternative mechanisms of expanding the base.
To ensure every defendant, no matter the outcome, is given an equal chance at trial.
We want the members of the community to believe and feel that this is truly a just and fair system.
Johnson says courts struggle to seat diverse juries in part because addresses on licenses are unreliable, and that's because people move around a lot. He also says the majority of no-shows are African American and Latino people, perhaps partly due to language barriers or mistrust of the system.
No jurisdiction wants to admit that they have a problem surrounding race.
Our Target 8 investigation into the lack of diversity in West Michigan juries continues right now. At 6 o'clock, we compared the racial makeup of juries to census data and found that while African Americans and Latinos each make up 10% of Kent County's population, they make up only 6% and 3.9% of jury pools. Target 8 investigator Coco McAvoy is taking this story further tonight, talking with a convicted killer and a defense attorney about why they think race matters. Coco?
Good evening. Our courts are required to select juries randomly from a, quote, fair cross-section of the community, and it's illegal to exclude a potential juror based solely on race. Still, Target 8 found we struggle to seat diverse juries. One man fought his case all the way to the Supreme Court based on the color of the Kent County jury that convicted him. It was a high-profile case that began in November of 1991. A bar fight escalated to a shooting where Soso's Lounge on South Division Avenue once stood. A man by the name of Christopher Rumbly was killed. And for the next 19 years, Diabola Smith made headlines, charged with second-degree murder and standing trial for the crime in 1993.
And when I went to trial, I was in front of an all-white jury.
Smith appealed his conviction based on the racial makeup of his jury.
And they wasn't from my environment. They didn't understand. Because the evidence wasn't enough evidence to convict me.
Smith's appeal made it all the way to the United States Supreme Court. But in 2010, the justices ruled Smith should not get a new trial. Tanya Kraus Phelan didn't represent Smith, but she defended many others just like him.
And from a defendant's perspective, who's a minority, looking at an all-Caucasian jury, to that defendant, it looks like unfairness, and it feels like unfairness.
That look and feel is exactly what Chief Judge Donald Johnston of Kent County believes leads to problems when people of color aren't present on a jury.
Well, I think people go back to their communities and say we had a stacked deck, we didn't have a fair shake. I think it creates disrespect for the system of justice and law and order generally.
Though Johnston believes jurors base their decisions on evidence and not race.
So, in other words, I don't think that black or Hispanic or white jurors are going to decide differently on a case because of their racial background.
Research on whether a jury's racial composition makes a difference is hard to come by. But a 2012 Duke University study found all-white jury pools in Florida convicted African-American defendants 16% more often than white defendants between the years of 2000 and 2010. That percentage was eliminated when at least one member of the jury pool was African American.
What is relevant and important in one community may not be relevant in another community, and those attitudes and perspectives, as we were talking before, plays a huge part in the way the jury will listen to the facts of a case and decide the facts of a case.
Kraus Phelan says diverse juries bring different ideas, viewpoints, and life experiences, and helps jurors separate any bias they may have when reaching a verdict.
It's just a very raw, sensitive subject. But the fact of the matter is, the criminal justice system is filled with raw, sensitive cases, and we need to be upfront and honest about what's happening in these trials.
And do you think your case would have had a different outcome if you had a more diverse jury?
Yes, I believe I would have. I wouldn't be sitting here for no life sentence. I believe that.
Michigan is one of only 7 states that still poll jurors from just one source, the list of licensed drivers and state ID holders. There's new legislation on the table that would add income tax filers and registered voters. I'm Coco McAvoy. Back to you.